In this video today, Joy Reid's show has been canceled by MSNBC. I'm sure they'll put a smile on your face, of course. Also, Pete Hegseth comes out and he is now explaining why the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was removed. We're going to get to both of these stories and more in this video, but let's read what happened to Joy Reid. This story was reported by the New York Times early this morning. Joy Reid's MSNBC show canceled in major shakeup. The 7 p.m. slot that she obviously hosted for the past 5 years, that's over with. And now, I know I've showed you guys some clips from MSNBC, and I'm sure you don't care to know who's replacing her. But it's the group that you usually see on the weekends, and they're just as bad as her, in my opinion. Now, the article goes on to say some key things that I just want to touch on, and then we'll get to everybody's reaction that I was able to gather. It says this first: the programming shakeup is the first major change made by Ms. Cutler, who was appointed president this month. Remember, the past president, she resigned. She's out of there, okay? Now, Ms. Cutler, her first name Rebecca, has been drawing up a new programming lineup to jumpstart the network's ratings, which have outperformed rival CNN, but lagged behind the longtime ratings leader, Fox News. This is the only point I really want to touch on, which is they're never going to catch Fox News because they hate Trump too much. So guys, this is just another example of why shows like mine and others out there, we're all killing the legacy media, okay? There's no point to have her and people like her on cable news. She's too hateful. And you have even alternative news sources that are more factual than she is. That is an embarrassment if you're talking about true journalism, and she's supposed to represent an actual media news network. Now, here's what Patrick Bet-David said. The media landscape is changing. It's tougher, plus more competitive. They're now competing with 5 million other podcasts. Some of them can't survive without writers, plus teleprompters. They can no longer hide behind their degree. Citizen journalism scares the hell out of them. I totally agree with him. Now, Charlie Kirk had this response. Joy Reid, a.k.a. the race lady at MSNBC, just had a show canceled because it was unwatchable. Good riddance to the most vitriolic, lowbrow, and unhinged race hustler ever allowed on national television. And Sage Steele actually responded to this by saying, sadly, every word of this is true. Maybe, just maybe, the days of making money off race baiting and divisiveness are beginning to come to an end. I totally agree with that. And Megyn Kelly brought up a good point here. Remember when Joy Reid laughingly mocked white women tears as pathetic and offensive to her? Who's crying now, Joey? Good riddance to the absolute worst person on television, and shame on NBC for letting it go on this long. Okay, so I'm sure that made you smile this Sunday morning. Now let's move to our next story, which is about the DOGE cuts, which is continuing to receive backlash every single day. And so we're going to start with Hakeem Jeffries, because what's interesting is in his mind believes that the Democrats are winning, but Jake Tapper on CNN hits him with the numbers. Watch.
We are actually winning in court. The Trump administration is losing. We are partnering on at least 79 different lawsuits that have been brought related to about 35 different illegal or unconstitutional executive orders. And the Trump administration continues to lose in court after court after court. And that effort will, of course, be on. House Republicans, they've been on the run. They are feeling the pressure of the fact that their policies are deeply unpopular with the American people. And we've seen that play out this past week all across the country. And Democrats are going to continue to make clear that we will stand against the effort to end Medicaid as we know it, stand against the effort to detonate Social Security or Medicare, certainly stand against the effort to undermine veterans' benefits or nutritional assistance to children and families.
So it's certainly true that President Trump's poll numbers are not in a great place, although they're higher than they ever were in his first term. But congressional Republicans polling is about 40%. Congressional Democrats polling is at about 20%. So that's an issue for you.
Now, again, men lie, women lie, numbers don't, right? So if we look at the approval ratings on the executive branch and then Congress, Donald Trump is still on top. He's at 45%. Now this is just one poll. We know after the election, we really can't trust any of this. Really, it leans left in my own personal opinion. But anyways, he's at 45%. The Republicans are at 40%, and congressional Democrats are at 21%. I just want to harp on that, because the winning that he was actually describing was that of the Trump administration, not the Democrats. And that's why they're more focused on Elon Musk and DOGE and not on the fraud they've been uncovering or the cuts that they've been making. And for the people in the back who believe the cuts really don't matter, here is what Senator Mullen had to say in response.
Quickly, before I let you go, the national debt is $36 trillion. DOGE is only dealing right now with the federal workers, which is only 8% of federal spending, a small fraction of the federal budget. So how do DOGE's layoffs actually deal with the debt problem?
Take care of your pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves. Every business owner knows that. Within only 4 short weeks, we've already identified over $55 billion of waste and fraud. We're only 4 weeks into a 4-year administration. That is taking care of the pennies and going to get to the dollars. We will get our house back in order.
Anybody who's ever paid down debt knows it's a snowball effect. You start with the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff, and then you work on the hard stuff as you go on. I mean, that's a life lesson in financial literacy. But I guess these people in Congress, one, don't want to acknowledge it. And we know the media won't acknowledge it either. That's number 2. But number 3, more importantly, it's better to do something than to do nothing at all, especially when you continue to hear what our taxpayers are actually paying for and how inefficient it really is. And for an example, here is Jim Jordan giving us one. Watch.
And I grabbed this headline, National Parks in Chaos after today's Washington Post story. Here's the first paragraph. California National Park, the Trump administration fired the only locksmith on staff. Next sentence. He was fired. He was the sole employee with keys and institutional knowledge needed to rescue visitors from locked restrooms. Now, if that isn't, I mean, that's the best you can do. The real question is, how do visitors get locked in restrooms? I mean, this is how ridiculous some of this thing is. So maybe there have been some mistakes made, but I think the intensity and the focus on getting rid of the wasteful spending, the one guy who can unlock people who somehow get locked in a restroom at a national park, this is ridiculous. So the arguments I think you're seeing from the left are pretty darn crazy when you think about, oh, we're spending money for the crazy things of trans comic opera yes. And wherever. I mean, come on.
Yeah, so the point that he's making is that some of these jobs, they're really not essential, okay? Some of them actually don't make sense, especially for what we're paying for. And here's the other thing that I'm noticing. They'll always say, oh, yeah, we agreed to cut fraud, waste, and abuse. Yeah, but you guys have never done it. That's the problem here. You guys, there would be an explanation about why General Charles C.Q. Brown Jr. was removed as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This explanation is coming from the Secretary of Defense himself, Pete Hegseth, this morning on Fox News. Let's take a look at that.
And I have a lot of respect for C.Q. Brown. I got to know him over the course of a month. He's an honorable man, not the right man for the moment. And ultimately, the president made that call. And Dan Raising Kane is going to be a fantastic chairman. I look forward to working with him. And he will give straightforward advice, as he did to President Trump, on the defeat of ISIS. No one else said it could be done in a matter of weeks. Raising Kane said it could. And guess what? It happened. And the president respects leaders who untie the hands of warfighters in a very dangerous world. I think Dan Kane's the man to meet the moment.
Now, if you were the president of your favorite sports team, I'm sure there would be some coaches that you would fire. I'm sure there would be star players that you would trade. That's exactly what's taking place here. President Trump has been elected. He has nominated Pete Hegseth to run the Department of Defense. Both in tandem believe the culture of the military needs to change. We need a new game plan, a new playbook, a new system. And we got to get the players that fit into that system. It's just that simple. Same thing happens in the private sector. Someone buys a business. Sometimes they replace the leadership. But again, the media is going to try to make this a race issue when simply it's just the cost of doing business, in my personal opinion. Now, he also commented on the top Pentagon officials who were also let go over the weekend. Watch this.
Not surprisingly, there's been some backlash to those who are worried about their removal. One Georgetown law professor says this: Trump also firing the Army, Navy, and Air Force JAGs. In some ways, that's even more chilling than firing the 4 stars. It's what you do when you're planning to break the law. You get rid of any lawyers who might try to slow you down. Your response to her?
Yeah, I don't know who Rosa is and what her hyperbole is all about. Ultimately, we want lawyers who give sound constitutional advice and don't exist to attempt to be roadblocks to anything that happens in their spots. What we know about these TJAGs, they're called TJAGs inside the military. Traditionally, they've been elected by each other or chosen by each other, which is exactly how it works often with the chairman as well. Small group of insulated officers who perpetuate the status quo. Well, guess what? Status quo hasn't worked very well at the Pentagon. It's time for fresh blood.
And for the people on the left who don't like this, who are believing that what Trump is doing is purging military leaders, guys, at the end of the day, he has the authority to do this. That's number one. Number two, we're talking about military leaders who served during a time where DEI became the main priority within the military, and they saw low recruiting numbers. So, I mean, I'm not sad that these people are being booted out of their positions. It's not like they're being dishonorably discharged. They will be okay, all right? I just find it funny how the media is so sympathetic to federal employees, to military personnel who are high-ranking. We're talking about generals. They will be okay. It's part of life. A new administration is coming in. They want to bring in their leadership, so they want to get the old ones out. It's just that simple. Now, here's what Congressman Mike Lawler also had to say about changes at the Pentagon.
Bottom line here, to me, is the Department of Defense needed a complete overhaul. President Trump ran on that. He said he was going to provide the Department of Defense an overhaul. We are in the most precarious place since the lead up to World War II, Martha, in large part because of the disastrous foreign policy of the Biden administration, including decisions made at the highest levels of the Pentagon, starting with that disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan. So the idea that there wouldn't be changes at the Pentagon, that they would somehow be exempt from changes in leadership with a new administration and a new foreign policy and a Defense Department that is focused on military readiness above all other considerations. I don't know why anybody's surprised by changes at the upper echelon of the Defense Department. They're not exempt from failure or the need for a change in direction.
Okay, so all of that really makes sense to me, but what doesn't is this overreaction to President Trump's statements about the Ukrainian President Zelensky, right? And remember, this is in regards to the rare earth minerals agreement that President Trump wants to make, that I would add is probably one of the smartest things the president can do in this particular situation, because what is the return on investment with the amount of money we spent in Ukraine? Can somebody tell me that, please? So here is the opposition to this, of course. Congressman Jim Himes, he believes this is like a mafia takeover.
U.S. have some kind of guarantee or return on the billions of taxpayer dollars that have flowed into that conflict?
Well, Shannon, I have two problems with that concept. One, it just looks like an episode of The Sopranos, right? Give us your minerals or we're not going to help you fight a bloody butcher. I mean, is this really what we want the greatest country in history to be known for like, some mafia thing? Look, we've always stood with the good guys. We stood with Churchill against Hitler in World War I. We stood with the good guys. Even when we've gotten it wrong in Vietnam, we were standing with the good guys against the Viet Cong. In Iraq, we were going after Saddam Hussein. Now this president is standing with the bad guy. He's saying Zelensky is the problem, when Zelensky, with very few resources, is trying to stand up for democracy against a totalitarian butcher.
Now, what he doesn't understand is, number one, Ukraine claims they haven't received all the money. So what happened to that money? And we're talking about taxpayer money. Number two, we already know there's been plenty of fraud, waste, and abuse that has been well documented with the money that we did give them. Number three, Europe ends up getting their money back. Why can't the U.S. get their money back? Why is it that America should just wastefully spend money, an unlimited amount, just keep it rolling and keep funding an endless war? Now, he won't have an answer to any of that, of course. He's just going to say Putin is bad and we need to keep funding this war. That's not good enough for the American people at this point. We need our money back, or we need a guarantee that we will get our money back, and they will get a guarantee that we will help them with security. I believe that is a fair agreement. And the other person who believes that too is Steve Witkoff. Here's what he had to say.
Well, Jake, let me say this with regard to the mineral rights agreement. The president came into office, and lo and behold, what did he find out? That we are the majority share of the aid to Ukraine, so we're funding it, and we were funding it with no arrangement to pay it back. Alternatively, the Europeans, who are most affected by this war, were funding the minority share, and they had agreements to pay it back. So, as is typical of the president, he's very, very sensible. He said to himself, that makes no sense to me. Why would the American public, taxpayers here, be funding the majority share, not get anything back? The Europeans funding the minority share, they get everything back. So this agreement is much about repayment for all that we have done on behalf of the Ukrainian people.
Now, of course, I want to provide at least a receipt to back up what he was saying, because there's a lot of, I would say, misinformation on social media, because what you'll see sometimes is Europe has committed more money. Well, Europe is not a country, okay? If you actually looked at the countries, America has committed the most money to Ukraine. We come in at $128 billion. Germany is number 2 with $27 billion, with 27 additional funds committed via the EU. France is at $8 billion. Additional funds to be committed via EU is $23 billion. The United Kingdom's at $29 billion. And I can go on and on and on. The point here is America has committed the most money, and we don't have a plan in place to actually get the money back in some shape or form. Now, what's fascinating, just this morning, due to President Trump continuing to call for re-elections in Ukraine, the Ukrainian President Zelensky came out and actually supports that idea. Hear it for yourself.
Just got this in. President Trump has called for new elections in Ukraine. A moment ago, President Zelensky was asked if he was willing to leave office in exchange for peace. Here's what he said.
Yes, I'll start with the latter. If you really need me to leave for the sake of peace, I'm ready to do so.
So there he is saying that he'd be willing to resign for the sake of peace.
I mean, look, I think that the idea of having never-ending wars is something that the most Americans, vast majority of Americans, are just not comfortable with. However, I'm just cautioned to see too much ground to Russia. I mean, Russia and China have been strengthening their relationship for about a decade now. That certainly isn't in U.S. interest, particularly as China increases its military spend to modernize its military. We're seeing their actions in South China Sea. We're seeing their actions across Africa. We're seeing them across South America. So that should really worry the administration. I do applaud the president for trying to find a resolution to this. I just think the resolution cannot give an upper hand to Vladimir Putin.
Can I just say real quick, Ukraine is winning this war. Ukraine has killed 4 times as many people as they've lost. Russia has lost twice as many people as the U.S. lost in World War II. And to defend, as a defending country, all you have to do is keep defending.
People like Adam Kinzinger, and especially the establishment in Washington, they are not reading the room. The American people overwhelmingly reject endless wars. There's no question. They overwhelmingly reject sending money over and over and over again. For what in return exactly? Especially when you see the problems we have here in our country. That doesn't mean we can't help other countries, but we got to help ourselves at the same time. And that's all people are really asking for. It's really common sense in my opinion. So listen, it brings me to the question of this video, which I know will put a smile on your face. How happy are you that Joy Reid's show has been canceled? And secondly, what is the next show that you would like to see canceled? And not because you believe in canceling shows, but you believe their product isn't good anymore. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Now, yesterday we put up a video talking about the media and how they're continuing to melt down over DOGE, but this is a little different. There's a DOGE dividend plan that has been introduced, meaning whatever money that is being saved, 20% will go back to American citizens in the form of a $5,000 check, and the other 80% will go to pay down debt. I'm gonna tell you right now, people like Van Jones did not like it, and so I want to show you the meltdown. And if you're interested in seeing that, all you have to do is click on that video because it's coming up right now.